just welcome. I just made both of you co-host. We are gonna try to keep people like visible, but if needed, I just learned how to mute everybody and how to remove their video. Let's trust people to make a responsible use. We have 140 people saying they were attending. I expect that number to be somewhere around 1/3 of that. But that's it. Once again, the estimated time per talk is going to be 30 minutes. So it's up to you how much you delegate to Q&A or not.
Sure.
I'm going to do a very short introduction of the meetup, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Then I'm going to introduce Marnix. You're the first speaker.
Cool.
And then Guillermo introduces you, Sean, and that's it. Do you have any questions before we start rolling? And hey, Tillman.
Should be okay, right?
Oh, go ahead. Are you recording, and will you post the recording?
Yes, definitely. I'm gonna edit just the 2 talks and hand them to you guys. Feel free to do whatever you want with them.
Cool.
That's good.
And of course, if you allow it, we would also love to share them.
Yes, absolutely. Unless I mess up completely, but I never think that I will.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it will be shareable.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm really looking forward to hearing both of your talks. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know each other. No,
Marnix. Hi, I'm Sean. I just started at Fishtown. I also am Canadian and just moved to Austria. So I'm new. I'm 100% brand new.
Cool.
How about yourself?
That's good. Well, so I'm with I know Juan and I know each other because he took over the training people at ABN AMRO in Power BI. Yes, because they GoDataDriven hired me as an external trainer to do the trainings, but they were doing so many trainings, so they decided to just bring someone on board, which is Juan. So I helped him get on board with the trainings, and so that's what I do. I teach and I consult in the area of Power BI.
Very cool. Where are you located?
I'm in The Hague.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, well, a little town just outside The Hague.
Outside of it, yeah.
Which I used to go all over the country, but well.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my wife's good friends is in the Hague. My wife used to work at the United Nations in New York, and so a Dutch colleague of hers moved back to the Hague recently.
Yeah,
I haven't been though. I haven't been to the Netherlands yet.
Haven't been to the Netherlands yet?
No.
Oh, okay. So what did you just said? Where are you from originally? Did you say?
It's confusing. I'm from Western Canada, and then the last 10 years I was in New York City, and then December Vienna.
Ah, cool. My wife is from New York City.
No way.
Well, just outside of New York, though. It's like just past the border of New York and Connecticut. Yeah, so she does actually live in Connecticut, but it's about like a 50-minute train ride or so. So every time we go there, we always go to New York.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, booking tickets for this August. We hope that we're going to be able to make it this August again.
It looks good. All of my friends are in New York. They are eating. They're outside, and they all this positive outlook. Most of them are getting vaccinated.
Yeah, I know. So my wife's friends are as well. Moving in the right direction there. Looking forward to going there this August. The book tickets. I think if you don't book tickets now, if you're going to be, everyone wants to go travel, of course. You know, when we can again, then so we have to make sure that we do that on time.
Yeah. Cool. I'm just going to step away for a sec. I'll be back.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. Wow, even more attendance.
Already.
Well, at least in the meetup page. It's the trick is you never know how many are actually going to show up.
Usually below 50%.
Yeah.
Unless it's a paid event, right? If you have people paid, then things change a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially Dutch people.
If
they paid, they're going to be there. If it's free, things are different.
The good thing, at least, is we are going to record this one. So very worst case scenario, even if 1 or 2 people join, hey, second person join, we can just still distribute it. And I hope people can learn from this for many more years to come.
That's good.
Cool. So welcome. I see some people just joined. You're some minutes earlier. Oh man, I have this funny thing in which I really want to open the window, but I know there's gonna be noise.
Yeah.
So it will have to do like this for a bit.
It'll work.
Yeah, I got a fan this week to keep the air moving, and I have a construction site right outside. So
I have air conditioning installed all over the house. These guys have never been as busy as they are right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's working from home and everyone's got too much money on their hands because they're not spending it. So, you know, yeah, add 2 and 2 up and then...
Yeah.
True. So welcome everybody that has joined. Maybe, yeah, we're gonna wait a little bit more.
Sure.
Was it easy for you guys to join, by the way? Did you have any problems?
yeah, it was very straightforward.
Okay, good.
You just need a Zoom account. And if you haven't, for example, logged in your phone or something like that, it might throw some people off. But once they create the accounts, it should be super straightforward. Hey, everybody. I'm starting to see some comments in here. So, hey, 𝗏𝗍𝗍𝗲. Welcome to the event. I see more people joining, which is, of course, exciting. Okay, let's start at 4:03, just to give people some time to fully join in. I can imagine some people are right now creating Zoom accounts to jump into this event. That's not a problem. Okay, in the meantime, I would like to introduce myself really briefly, but more importantly, introduce the whole objective of this meetup. So my name is Juan. I am located in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and together with some colleagues, including Guillermo, which is also in the call. He's gonna say hi in a bit. We had an idea to organize a meetup for everybody that is interested in the topic of analytics engineering. Or maybe even more concretely, we are gonna have people that are interested in analytics as a topic, people that are interested in engineering, people that are gonna be interested in some of the tools that our speakers are gonna discuss. Like today, we're gonna have Power BI and DBT, but we're open to working with different tools in the future. And we also hope that people are gonna be just interested in other topics like data democratization or best practices around having a data-driven organization. Part of our vision is we want to keep this meetup a place for the people doing hands-on work. And to me, it is really important that the speakers are people doing hands-on work, that you as a person working with data can relate to them, and hopefully that you will have some questions at the end for these people. So in the case of today, and I'm about to introduce the first speaker, it is a person I got to meet. He actually taught me quite a lot of my Power BI knowledge, and he is really amazing at it. He's super passionate. He's good with very complex use cases. And I thought, wow, it is people like him, the ones that I want to have at my meetup speaking. Hey, look in the comments. Welcome everybody, see more people joining. For those of you that missed it, I was introducing the meetup. But now without further ado, I think it's time for us to introduce the first speaker. He is a Power BI freelancer. So if there are any questions that you have, it's a Dutch speaker as well, which I know it's a big deal for some of the Dutch companies. He's exceptional, very passionate, and a really big fan of writing very complex DAX visualizations. To speak about data democratization with Power BI, I would like everybody to do at least imaginary round of applause, or sure, just do it in virtually with the little hands. But let's just give a really big applause to Marnix Jansen. Marnix, the stage is yours.
Sure.
Go for it.
Well, thanks for those kind words, Ron, and thanks for organizing this event, and thanks for having me as well. Enjoy being here. So yeah, democratization of data. Well, I mean, so my background, I used to be a financial, but I quit that a few years ago, and all I do now is BI intelligence and trainings. You know, the tool that I'm using is Power BI. So I really went in depth when it comes to Power BI, obviously. And I do feel that this is a piece of technology that is disruptive when it comes to the job of any analyst. And an analyst, as far as I'm concerned, a financial accountant could be an analyst, a credit risk manager could be an analyst, a pricing analyst obviously is an analyst. All these kind of positions, all these kind of jobs could get turned upside down by implementing Power BI the right way. Okay, so and I'm just going to show you how that works. So let me start off by sharing my screen. Here we go. Oh, this screen. Here we are. Okay, so let me just introduce Power BI first off. So yeah, so what Power BI is going to do, it's going to take your data, which every organization's got, right? Data all over the place in all sorts of structures, and take that data and turn that data into insight. Okay, that is what we're set out to do using Power BI. We're going to run through this little cycle that you're going to run through every single time you use Power BI to produce insight. Start by accessing data. So wherever your data lives, could be in a database or in a file or in an Excel spreadsheet or in a website or OData or in the cloud, doesn't matter. Wherever your data lives, you're going to go ahead and access that data, grab that data. Second, you're going to clean your data. So what do I mean by cleaning your data? Well, it could be all sorts of stuff, right? You could be facing missing values. So you need to somehow make sure that you fill those missing values. Or you could also have data that you do not need in your model, right? The data that you just have to make sure that you filter that data out of your source before loading it in, okay? Or right, if you got data at the year level, but you're not interested in that level, all you care about is just their total sales over the few years. Okay? So then you need to group at a certain level. Those are just 3 examples. There's many, many more examples of what you're going to do if you clean your data. Okay. So next, you're going to mash it up. Oh, this is 𝗏𝗏, so it's mash up. And mashing up means bring your data together. So you got data coming in out of multiple data sources. You have to mash that up. So turn multiple sources into one overall model. Okay. So this could be an example, left top corner. So you got 3 different sources for revenue for a couple different years. And so what you need to do is append all of these sources, turn it into one total table. So this will be a way of mashing up your data, or indeed combine your data. If I got one source, and in this one source I have revenue numbers, all I got is client numbers, right? Client numbers. But then in another source, I do have that client name for every client number. So we need to look that up, which is called merging of your data. So you merge your data and turn this into one overall data set. So you combine your data. After you've combined your data, well, you're basically done combining your data, building your data model, and then you go ahead and start exploring that data. Okay, so this is where you're going to be looking for hidden insights in your data during the data exploration phase. So next, you're going to visualize that data. So the hidden insights that you have discovered within your data, you want to visualize those hidden insights. So this is where you're going to be actually designing and building your dashboard. And last but not least, you need to share your data. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and distribute that dashboard that you've created in all sorts of ways, either on a desktop, on an iPad, on a phone, any kind of way. So let me really quickly show you a demo of how that could be done. So here I have Power BI, completely empty Power BI model, right? There's nothing in it, nothing in here so far. So what we're going to do is bring in some data. So let me go ahead and take some data out of a SQL server. So I need to connect to a SQL server. Well, this way I would have to, let me change the resolution a little bit so it's easier for people that do not have a huge screen like myself to also be able to see what I'm doing here. Here we go. There we are. Okay. It's better. Okay, so we can pull some data out of a database. So the example here that I'm using, and I'm going to connect to a database which I've already connected to before. Okay, so I'm going to connect to a database, and what I'm going to bring in is, it's all dummy data, of course, but what I'm going to bring in is data on how much expenses did I occur in my IT. How much IT expenses did I occur? So we're going to bring that data in out of a database. Okay, so we're going to just load this into Power BI. This is all good. So we're going to load this straight away without doing any transformations on this data. But then I got a second data source where I maintain my budget. So my budget for my IT expenses, which is in an Excel spreadsheet. So I need to connect to a different source, right? I'm able to do that, connect to different data sources within one and the same model. Let me go ahead and do that. Here is an Excel spreadsheet with the budgeted expenses. So we get both the actuals out of a database and my budget out of an Excel. Well, all organizations that I've consulted always used this. We do need to transform a little bit. Always use that budget versus actuals in order to obtain control. Make sure that they remain within control when it comes to their financials. Okay, so now we need to make sure that that first row, we have to turn those into headers. But this data structure is a little strangely formatted, right? It's the structure is a little off. Let me go ahead by make sure that the first row actually are the headers. But this is a little off. So now I got this data where I got many different columns. So this is structured in many different columns. Instead of the way that you want to have this in a nice and clean data set, you would just have one column for dates and one column for budgeted expenses. Well, the way to solve that here in Power Query, so the part of Power BI where you do all of your transformations that you need to do, is unpivot these columns. Okay, unpivot these columns. So this is better, right? So now we actually have a date. And we got our expenses. So this will be my budget expenses. There we go. So I did this transformation before loading this data into Power BI. Okay, so this is Power Query. This is the application that is used by many different Microsoft applications, Power BI being just one of them, where you can transform your data and then load it into the tool. Okay, so close and apply, close the Power Query editor and apply these changes, load this data into Power BI. Okay, so now I got data from my SQL Server where I maintain the actual expenses and data from my, let's see where we are. From data, doesn't seem to have loaded in here. Budget. Here we go. Close and apply. There we go. So now we have both tables. You can see those here, but I can also actually see the underlying data. Here would be all of the underlying data. So I'd be able to also see what I'm working with. So here we need to model the data a little bit. Don't know if you're familiar with star schemas, but we do need one here. So let me add a dimension table, right? Any data model, any relational database is always going to have a calendar table. The same goes for Power BI. I got a little bit of code here, which is going to produce a calendar table. Okay, so I take that little bit of code off my website, enter this into a new table. Here, I'm going to be able to enter that code. So I'm going to paste that code here. It doesn't really matter what the code looks like, right? And all I want you to see is the result. So I have to start off by a date. End this by a specific date. There we go. Date. So now this is going to result into a calendar table, which is going to get added to my data model. So using a little bit of DAX, data analysis expressions, DAX code, I have been able to add a calendar table to my data model, which is also going to be visible here. So I'll be able to actually use that while I model my data. So make sure that I create joins, stable joins between the calendar and the expenses table. So now out of my calendar table, I'm going to be able to select the month names. Or if I start off by taking the month names, the sort order is not going to be the way in which I like it. Right, this is alphabetically sorted now, so we're going to have to fix that. So under sort by column, I can tell it to sort by the actual month numbers. So we get the sort order that we were out for. And then I can simply add my budget expenses and my actual expenses. And for some reason or another, date to date. So let me just quickly check why I do not have the budget expenses the join doesn't work. So I guess it's not a date type. Exactly. I have to convert this into a data type in order for this to be able to work. So all I do is convert this into a data type, and now it'll work. Gotta make sure that I set my data types right, okay? Forgot about doing that. So now it has to reload this data, which it just did. And here we go. So now we do have that data, so we can compare budgeted versus actuals. Well, in a table like this would be a really poor way of visualizing this, of course. I always try to convince people not to use tables and show raw data. Instead, always find a way in order to be able to visualize your data. I myself prefer this visual, but there's many, many more in Power BI, Zebra BI charts. So let me just add this here visual to my data model. Here we go. So this is a way of just showing the trend in time, right? So I just have this here. Now it jumps at me like, how are we doing compared to the budget? Now it just jumps at me. I can see this in one glance, right? How it is that we are doing. Then second, what I also want to make sure that I add is a dimension table, which allows me for drilling down the different category, the expenses categories that we have. So I would have to add another table here. So let me go ahead and do that. And again, I'm going to add a little bit of DAX. Don't worry too much about the DAX. All I need you to understand is the result that I'm producing. So we do a Dave cost element dimension. Summarize, and I'm going to take the expenses, cost element name, group, and then the group. So this is going to result into a table. So yes, I can enter some DAX, which is going to create an entire table. So this will be a dimension table that I can also, again, use in order to model my data. So cost element name to cost element name, create those two joins. Name to cost element name. And here we go. So now I'd be able to actually slice and dice by cost element name. Let me add a visual that I usually like for doing that kind of visualizing that kind of data. Zoom. Here we go. So I'm going to add that visual that is going so as you can tell, there's many visuals that are all created and maintained by the Power BI community. So I'd be able to add all sorts of visuals to my Power BI model. So a group, subgroup, individual name. Yes, I understand, that's fine. And then add a expenses, some kind of value here. Okay, so apparently like around 45% of all my expenses are labor-related expenses. The rest is hardware and software-related expenses. I'm going to be able to drill down. So I just click on labor. Okay, so now here, this chart is showing me labor. So this has been adjusted for my selection here. So here I can still see that 45% is what I'm looking at here. So labor, okay? So we distinguish between internal labor and external labor. So I'll be able to drill down into internal labor, have this get updated as well, and also make sure that I can filter on any of these items. And that is Power BI in a nutshell. So you would dress up your dashboard a little bit, right, in some kind of way. Say, okay, I want to have borders and I want to have this at 15%. Make it look a little nicer. There's all sorts of stuff that I'd be able to do in order to make sure that I get my dashboard looking the way that I'd like it to. And that is really what all I wanted to show on Power BI. Really basic data model production, right? This is what you're always going to run, the process you would always run by. However, real life, of course, things get far more complex, but you should always be able to manage with Power BI. Questions? I had 20 minutes. I had 20 minutes for my demo, and I think I did okay there. So you got 10 minutes now to ask me anything on Power BI, preferably.
Thank you, Marnix, for the amazing demo. Please either unmute yourself and ask a question or write it in the chat and I can just read it for you. So we have a comment right here, which is what a wonderful demonstration. So that's a compliment to you, Marnix. Maybe a question that comes from my side, but in the meantime, while people are typing is, what are the best actions you can do if you want to just get hands-on with Power BI and you're an absolute beginner?
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, I quite often compare learning Power BI to learning how to speak a foreign language. So the best way to go about that is just do it a lot, right? And that goes for Power BI just the same. Start off by basic trainings. The thing about training requirement is that if you start off using Power BI, you simply do not know what you do not know. You get told all sorts of stuff and taught all sorts of stuff in a training. So that might help you kickstart your learning curve. And then afterwards, yeah, you just got to do it a lot. And then you'll find you'll be spending a lot of time on Google, YouTube, people's websites, reading blogs. There's loads of books out there on Power BI. Even though it's only been around for 5 years. Power BI is a relatively new product, but still, by the meantime, millions of people are using Power BI. And so also loads of people that are adding content and teaching. And so that would be the way to go about that.
Thanks, Marnix. Ooh, we have quite some questions in the chat.
Sure.
The first one, question from Sean. What databases can Power BI connect to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here we go. So if I were to go ahead and just, I mean, I can tell you, but it's easier to show. Here, so if I'm going to go get data more, give me a sec, bear with me, databases, loads of them, right? So these are all, so you do not have to program your own interface. I mean, I've recently, a few weeks ago, used the 𝗏𝗏. So this is a team of people from Microsoft and a team of people from SAP working together on creating this here connector. Now, why would they do that? Well, from an SAP point of view, if you have a connector to Power BI, anyone that is considering acquiring an ERP system, they're probably going to choose SAP because they have that connector to Power BI, and the other way around as well. Okay, so they both win. So that is why they've collaborated and worked together with all these suppliers, database suppliers, in order to create those connections. So these are just databases, right? Azure connections, Azure SQL, but all sorts of Azure services are also available for you to connect to without having to be able to program an interface.
Thank you. Next question from John is, does Microsoft have a free version for learning purposes?
Power BI is free. Power BI is free up to the point where you want to share your content. So you can just download Power BI for free, use it as much as you like for free. You can even publish your dashboards to the cloud. However, when you want to share your dashboard with someone else, you're going to have to pay. So then you have to buy a license, which, what's the point of creating a dashboard if you're not going to share, right? So it's free, but actually you have to pay, but it's €8 a month. So it is by far, far cheaper than all of its competitors.
Thanks. Next question from Ian. What downsides do you see in Power BI compared to other BI tools? Tricky one.
Tricky one. I'd have to say, though, that I'm not that familiar with other players out there on the market. What I do have to say, though, is that Microsoft is clearly moving towards the same position in BI tools as they have in the spreadsheet market, right? But with Magic BI Quadrant. So what I do have, oh, it's Click showing me this. I wasn't aware of that. I would get Click. Oh, it's a bit small. Here we go. This is not the one that I was looking for. Give me one sec. Images. This should be the one. Yeah, there we go. So this is the way Gartner perceives. I mean, you can ask me, but I don't know too much about all of this. Gartner, so this is Gartner producing this BI Magic Quadrant. They do thorough research and they do know what they're talking about if they have to compare Microsoft to other tools. And this is how they perceive the market.
Perfect. The next question that we have is, can we use a model like dimension date across multiple workbooks and reports? I think the question is about being able to reuse the model that you're creating.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. So what you're going to do, you have it's not called a model. It's actually called a Power BI data set, but that is the model. So I can upload a Power BI model and then have other people access that model. So if I were to connect, but I cannot connect to because since I already got data in here, what I need to do is delete all of this. And then I got an empty data model, right? So yeah, you have to start off by an empty data model, and then you'll be able to connect to a data model that has been uploaded to the cloud, right? So I mean, I have to make sure that I've been granted access to that model. I can just pick anyone. So now I connect to that model, and then all I get is, so I do not get any visuals. I do not get any report. All I get is just the data model. So I wouldn't be able to change the data model here either, right? This data model, I do not maintain the data model. So I'm not even able to see the underlying data because I cannot access the data. All I can do is build a report on top of an existing data model. What you'd also be able to do is promote your own data model, tell the world, everyone within your organization that you are confident that this is a good data model. What also can be done is by the central BI team, they can certify a data model. So then you know if you have to select one of the data models, large organizations, right? You got many different data models. If one of them is certified, then you know two things. One, it has been audited. So someone had a really close look at that data model, and two, the rest, all the other analysts in this organization are also using that model. So that would be like a way to achieve one version of the truth.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions before we give the word to the next speaker. So next question is, and I already know the answer. I recently started using Tableau as a visualization tool. What do you suggest for a beginner? Either to start with Tableau and understand the tool, or start with Power BI?
Well, what you said, you already know the answer. What is it?
Your full team Power BI.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know Tableau, so it's hard for me to say. But then I'm just, you know, the thing is that all I can refer to is people that do. And again, Gartner, they really know what they're talking about. And these people really had a thorough look at all of these tools. So IBM will be Cognos, Oracle will be Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition. So these, by Business Intelligence, these are all of their BI tools. Well, Tableau has only got Tableau, right? Well, Tableau has been acquired by Salesforce, though, not that long ago. But so, I mean, I'd have a hard time answering that question because I'm not that familiar with Tableau. What I can do, though, is tell you that the people from Gartner do know Tableau and they do know Microsoft, and this is what they feel.
Thanks. Next question is, what's your favorite feature of Power BI?
Favorite feature of Power BI? Well, I'd have to say my own personal favorite feature is DAX. I don't know whether that's a feature, but I always like that part best, right? DAX, so DAX is data analysis expressions. that is the formula language in which you're going to write all of your the formula language that you're going to use for adding analytical power to your models. Okay, and it is amazing in terms of the abilities that it will provide for what you can do in terms of analyzing your data, and it is amazing in terms of performance. Hundreds of millions of records, and it'll just analyze that within a blink of an eye. So DAX will be my favorite part of Power BI.
Perfect. And the last question from Gabriela, it's a bit similar. It's awesome presentation, thanks. The question is, I use Tableau my day-to-day, but I can see some charts here can be done in a super easy way, like donut charts. So just wondering if you had any thoughts on Tableau versus Power BI.
Yeah, same answer. Same answer.
What I could say as somebody that uses both, and I hope this can resonate, is I saw a quote on the internet, and that was, Power BI is 80% data, 20% visualization. Tableau is 80% visualization, 20% data. That statement seems to resonate. It depends on how much of the data cleaning or how much flexibility you want. Either way, I think both are terrific. I don't know if you have something to add there, Marnix.
Yeah, but there's also Power BI in terms of ETL, right? So extract, transform, and load, which is some functionality that every database is going to have, because you have to somehow get data into your database. So Power BI has that as well, but you use Power Query. Power Query is not only part of Power BI, but it's part of all other Microsoft services, and it is extremely powerful and highly expressive formula language, which is going to allow for performing any kind of ETL that you might want to do self-service. So you don't need to have a lot of C# Java programming background, nothing whatsoever actually, and you're going to be able to do ETL. And then when it comes to data modeling, well, you got DAX in order to do your data modeling. So yeah, it is really powerful in terms of bringing in your data and analyzing it.
Perfect. Maybe the last question rather fast, so we don't take too much time from the second speaker. The question is, does Power BI have an abstraction layer shielding end users from having to know what tables are available, how they're joined, etc.?
Yeah, well, I mean, end users, so what you usually have, you have three roles as I perceive things, right? So you have a data modeler, the person, the individual that is going to do the ETL, bringing in the data, cleaning it up and loading it into Power BI, and then actually model the data, structure all of the tables and create all of the table joins. So that will be the data modeler. Then the analyst is going to step in. Next, and sometimes it's the same person. Quite often it's the same person, but then it's actually one person taking off his data modeling hat and then putting on the data analyst hat. So then that person, data analyst, and then third, there's the consumer. So the business manager, business individuals that are going to use that dashboard to base business decisions upon it. So when it comes to that data analyst, so what you'd be able to do is just upload the data model and then allow for data analysts to access that data model remotely without being able to adjust the data model. Well, they can adjust it locally, so they'd be able to adjust that model, but not the one that is shared with everyone, right? They would not be able to touch that. So yeah, you will be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Marnix. Big applause for Marnix. Feel free to clap virtually, unmute yourself and clap. That's all fun. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. And remember, Marnix is a freelancer. If you have any questions about Power BI, look him up on LinkedIn, or maybe you can share your webpage in the comments in a bit.
Sure, will do. Will do. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And now I would like to give the word back to my colleague, Guillermo, who's going to introduce the next speaker. Guillermo, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. So hello, guys. I'm Guillermo. I'm an analytics engineer, also at GoDataDriven, together with Juan. I'm the other co-host of this meetup, and I'm really excited to introduce this next speaker. So he's working recently as a solutions architect for 𝗏𝗏 Analytics, which is the creator of DBT. DBT stands for Data Build Tool. And I think it's one of the coolest tools that we have in the market right now. I think it's really changing the way we do data wrangling and preparing data and making data available for everybody. So yeah. His name is 𝗠𝗿𝗍𝗁. He's, as I said earlier, a solutions architect at Fishtown. He recently moved to Vienna, so if you have any German lessons for him, he would also appreciate that, maybe in exchange for some DBT lessons. So yeah, without further ado, Son, please.
Thanks, Guillermo. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here. Thanks for that introduction. I have some slides for you today about DBT. Let me share my screen, and I'm going to go in present mode. All right. Tell me if you can't see it. All right. My talk is entitled State of Testing in DBT. This is me. Thanks again for that intro. I think you hit all the points. What I want to say too is, what does it mean for me to be a solutions architect? It means I help enterprise customers of Fishtown Analytics with DBT and DBT Cloud in particular. That's our cloud offering, and we want to make sure people are successful with DBT, basically. I'll get into what DBT is. What I'm going to try to do in this talk, it's going to be segmented in a few sections. I will also say we have a Slack channel with the community. The community I've learned a lot from myself, a very inclusive community, good for people who are data analysts, who are curious about data modeling, about anything data really, and would just like to plug that. Also, off the top, would like to plug with GoDataDriven, our colleagues here, they will be teaching a DBT Learn training for the EMEA region. It will be in English. It's 2 days long. It's hosted by 𝗏𝗲𝗊𝗍𝗏. And there is a price associated with it. Just go to the GoDataDriven website. And I'm also going to be sharing these slides at the very end of this talk. So you'll get the link in there. So if you're curious about DBT, if you want to level up, this is where you go. Okay, so about this talk. I have a lot of content. I'm going to blow through it really fast, but I hope at the very least that you'll learn what DBT is if you don't know what it is. If you do know what DBT is, maybe you'll learn a bit more about testing. And if you happen to have like a software engineering background like myself, then we can get into some really advanced topics in unit testing. And even if you don't get that, at the end, I'll try to tease what's coming in the next version of DBT to give you a little sneak preview. Okay, so I'm really happy that Marnix gave the presentation about Power BI right from the beginning, because it's a really good segue for me. The way I view the world is Power BI is one of the BI tools out there, and Tableau is another one that was talked a lot about on this side. And those tools are querying the database and the model data in your data warehouse, and have BigQuery here, Snowflake. Those are the really popular ones these days, Redshift, Postgres. And data is loaded into these databases, right? And we have partners in Fivetran that load data from your Salesforce or from your Jira or from your Google Ads into your data warehouse. And where does DBT sit in the picture, right? I kind of told you this whole story. DBT is executing queries in your data warehouse to model your data, to get that raw data as it comes into something that's really usable and easy, as Marnix just showed, right? Where you get your dimensions and you can quickly make these reports. So really these tools are complementary. Hope you understand that. Core principles about DBT, like how do we do it, right? How does DBT work? There's two core principles. One, we unite on SQL. So really like SQL is the language of DBT. If you know SQL, you should be able to make these data transformations happen. We like that because a lot of people know SQL, or a lot of people could benefit from learning SQL because it's so common in so many tools. And then the second principle is we want people to use DBT like software engineers. We want repeatable best practices, peer review, testing testing. That's what I'm talking about today. Version control. So we really want to like level up the skills of people who might be overwhelmed with how to use data and to make it easier and better for them. It's actually kind of fun, to be honest. I'm a bit of a nerd, so. Okay, so let's go into the nitty gritty of like how it works. DBT, as I kind of mentioned, is SQL. On the left-hand side here, we have a DBT model. A DBT model is a select statement. And in this case, we are selecting data from a table called base orders, and we're removing any that have been deleted. So this is what we call removing soft deletes. And what we come out of on the other side is a data set that just doesn't have any deleted orders. So you only are looking at data about the orders that are not deleted. So that's what the DBT model looks like. When I run DBT, then I get this on the right-hand side. I get this create table statement that wraps around the model. And this makes it easy for you as an analyst or someone who's data modeling to just focus on the business logic and not focus on the create table statements or the update statements or the delete statements. Like, how does data flow through? And I have table here, but you can also do views and other advanced approaches. Okay, so that's the first concept. The second thing I want to share about this is this curly brace notation we have here. This is called Jinja. And we put that on top of SQL. And what this is saying here is now this model is referring to another model. So we have two models that we're building, and they're dependent on each other. In particular, this orders model is dependent on the stage orders model. And then you see that dependency kind of encoded in this diagram up here. And that's the one reason why it's important for the ref. And the second reason is because we can change where the model is being executed, whether it's in your development environment or your production environment. So you're writing these transformations once, and you can execute them pretty much anywhere. This is happening with the DBT run step. You're actually executing this command called DBT run. This takes this code and will turn it into this code. Okay, kind of going into the nitty gritty. Pretend like you have a Snowflake environment like this. If you've seen Snowflake, here we have all the objects in our schemas in Snowflake. We have a customer table, and this is what the customer table looks like in Snowflake. A lot of data. It's got these C name, C address, C nation key. We can have a DBT model that looks like this, that is a select statement and is remapping the names of the columns into something that we want to work with. And we have this source function here, which is saying source customer. So we're taking that data, that's raw data, and we're renaming it. Then you can do something like this, where you have a second model where you are making another select statement, and you're joining this stage customers table here, which is this one on the right-hand side I just showed you, and then also joining that together with other staging tables you've created. And then now we're joining three tables together, and we're flattening it out, making a dimensional table, something that's easier to work with. This happens when you execute DBT run. Then back in Snowflake, there's another object created, the dim customers. So what I'm saying is that from the original source data with the two models, you run DBT, you're creating more models, you're creating more objects in your database. Hope that gives you an idea of just what DBT does. With DBT, you get for free this visualization automatically, just by writing those ref statements. By having those three ref statements in the dim customers, I can then visualize how the data flows in the data warehouse. It coming from the green source tables into these basic rename models into a dim customers that's flattened out and easier to use. And zooming out from this, we can see the whole project that I was just showing you in this slide here, one subset of the models. But you can do all of your modeling this way and view how data flows from all the source tables to these staging models, to these more complex dimensions and facts, into aggregations that are then used in Power BI and other BI tools. And over here in orange, this is representing a dashboard in Power BI, for example. How does it look like in the code, in a file structure? This is kind of a complex visualization here, but what I'm trying to show is that these are files, separate files, SQL files. And I'm showing you here, here's dim customers, which is sitting beside other fact tables, and staged customers, which is sitting by other stages. So you can organize it like a project. And then that dbt run, I've mentioned that a couple times. So this here is a screenshot from dbt cloud, and here it's executing dbt run. And what we see in the logs of the run is all of these create these models. In this case, a view model, and we see what's actually going on. Step by step, we get to understand these objects as they're being created in our data warehouse. Okay, that is dbt in a nutshell. Now we're going to shift gears. Okay, if that was it, my talk would be over. But we have another feature, testing, which I'm a fan of. I've been thinking a lot about it. In my last role, I worked at a company, 𝗦𝗲𝗏 as a startup and e-commerce. And my team and I, we were thinking a lot about how to make good dbt models. Right. And after using it for a couple of years, we were like, okay, how do we really get good quality data in our data warehouse? And that's where dbt testing came in. It can help us, it helped us like make sure that the data we were producing that others were consuming was accurate. And as my colleague, Nick, my teammate, he's my sales director, he and I talk every day. He says it helps you to sleep at night. That's what testing does. Let me show you how. So built in with dbt, which by the way is it's a tool you can use as an open source tool as well. So it's something you can just download and run on your computer. You get testing for free in there. Let's talk about testing. dbt ensures data quality through our testing framework. You can test for data quality and transformations. And right out of the box, you get tests including uniqueness, null checks, set membership, foreign key constraints. These are things that are not available in the popular data warehouses. And you can confirm this functionality of your data model. How does it work? The schema tests. The first one I want to show you is you specify the schema test in a YAML file. Say if I have a table and in that table I have a column ID, and I know that must be unique. Then in my configuration YAML file, I just specify that this column must be unique. The name must be not null. That the type is only of a certain subset of types. So schema tests are really just a nice way to say these things. The second kind of test in dbt is a data test. And this is really like where it gets interesting. Any kind of SQL statement can be tested, and anything that you can imagine can be tested as long as you can write it as a SQL statement. In particular, if you can write this, for example, this orders table where total amount is less than 0. So imagine you have an order, but there's less than 0 amount. There's -1 amount. It just doesn't make sense. So therefore, by writing this test and adding it to my dbt project, I can be confident that all orders have 0 or more amounts. So I hope that makes sense on that. How does running tests work? Another screenshot from dbt cloud. You similarly can execute dbt test. It will go through all the tests in your project and execute them and tell you whether all of them have passed or if any of them have failed. If any have failed, you can be alerted, emailed or by Slack. And that way you can know that the data quality is bad in your project and you have something to do. So just focusing on this one here, this test is 1 of 64. It's checking for not nulls on this particular column. And when I ran it, it passed. It took 2 seconds to run, and it's just executing a query on the database. Okay, so testing is nice. It's good to do on a regular basis. Let's talk about some more advanced approaches of testing. Continuous integration. So working together as a team on a dbt project is something we see very commonly. You have yourself, you're working on one feature, your teammate is working on another feature. You're trying to bring these changes together into your Git repository and have that run in production. So continuous integration is a good part. You can use testing as part of continuous integration as a way to ensure quality of your project. Here's the workflow. The developer adds or changes a model. Then they can run DBT tests in their environment to confirm that their change works. Then they can open up a pull request in their Git provider, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. And a best practice is to have DBT automatically run DBT tests on that change. And that way they know that the change works. And having that report back to the pull request is also really helpful as a developer to know that the change is good. A second application of testing in DBT is a promotion step in your DBT deploy. So for example, a blue-green deploy. This is an advanced pattern here, but what I'm saying is that a typical thing in a DBT project is that a DBT project is run on a nightly cadence, right? You're rebuilding your data every night. And so imagine that the job is triggered at the nightly cadence. What you can do is set up DBT so it executes on a green database. I'm just calling it green as arbitrary color, right? It's executing on a green database. Meanwhile, a BI tool such as Power BI is querying a blue database. And therefore, DBT is working on making new data in a data set that isn't being accessed by the business intelligence tool. And this gives an extra layer of security because after DBT run has completed and DBT test has completed, then you can swap which database the BI tool is looking at and now go to the green database because I know it's tested. But if it hasn't, then just don't switch over and get an alert. Hope that makes sense. There's a lot more information in this link below. I want to wrap up this section here. When do I add tests? We generally say add null tests and unique tests for every DBT model you create. Generally, every model is going to have a primary key, an ID. And the other thing to say is add tests when you're writing your models. That is when you know the most about your modeling, right? You write your model, you're making your transformation, your select statements. Right after that, write a test. I call him a friend, Josh. He works at Spotify now. I knew him in New York. He said, the purpose of testing is to validate our assumptions. Good tests catch bad assumptions. Every time you make an assumption about the state of your data or the result of a query, you should write a test to confirm that assumption. That's really a great summary of when tests are appropriate. All right. So this is, I'm going to go pretty fast now because I'm coming to the end of my talk. I want to make sure I can answer a question or two. And I'm going to talk about unit tests. This is an advanced topic. So what generally I'll say is unit tests are possible in DBT, but they're hard, and that's of today. So why would I want to unit test? Unit tests are controlled. They're easy to write in applications. What I mean by applications are like web applications or software project. And furthermore, as a software engineer, I look for unit tests in a project because usually they're a sign of quality of the code and the application. My colleague, Matt, when he thinks about unit tests, he thinks unit tests are most valuable in bringing awareness of simple changes to projects than in the code that I wasn't consciously aware of. It seemed to matter less the nature of the test than the fact that it would trigger a failure, signaling some kind of structural change as the code is updated. So unit tests kind of evoke this quality of like, when I run a unit test, I know, and then something breaks, I know something is fundamentally wrong with what I did. I didn't even talk about what unit testing is. I hoped I could try to give you that essence of it before I introduce it. What is a unit test? A unit test quickly proves a unit of code works as expected. So by quickly, I mean within seconds. A unit of code, I mean a very small chunk of what I'm testing. And as expected means whatever I mean, what I want it to mean. It can be whatever I want. A unit test does not test the functionality of external systems. It doesn't care about whether it can connect to your database or not. It just focuses on your code. And the process of a unit test is this. There's a setup step, there's an execute code under test step, and there's a verification step with assertions. I find this diagram to be really helpful to show what a unit test is. Each of these green boxes is a unit test, and each of these brown boxes you can think of as a DBT model in our context here. And what we're trying to show is that each test is testing a little chunk here and there. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 writes a lot more about this. So let's bring this back to an example, because I'm talking very abstract. Back to this customers and dim customers, and I hope you got the gist of this. Here's that code of that model that we were talking about. An example in this context here of a unit test. Okay, so an example of it is given 2 specific customers, regions, and nations, then 2 specific records are produced. That's, to me, like a core essence of a unit test. Given that you have 2 records of customers, regions, and nations, 2 records are produced. I'm going to try to show that. The process of unit testing, as I mentioned previously, is setup, execute, code under test, verify. For setup, I see there are 2 options of how to do this. One, you can load mock data into your database as a DBT seed. So here are the customers as a CSV, nations as a CSV, and regions as a CSV. You can load those in, and that's your unit test, right? The 2 records. That's what I was trying to mention. These are 2 customers, 2 nations, 2 regions. Another way to do it is to define them as select statements inside of mock models. So you can imagine that these SQL queries are each producing 2 records, and you can make them as mock models in your project. Now, going to the next step, executing code under test. How do I convince my DBT project to use these mock data sets instead of the real data sets, which may be more rich? One way is to put a CTE, a common table expression, right at the top with Jinja if statements. And that way, if a variable mock is set in my DBT run, then I use the mock table. Otherwise, use the production table. A second way of doing that is to override the ref function itself. So if you're familiar with the ref function, you use it everywhere. You can actually override this and make it do something completely different. And in this case, what I'm showing is I can put a mock variable right in an if statement. And if that's true, then use a mock model instead of the normal model. So that's a bit of a mind bend if you've used DBT before. Finally, verification. How can you do that? So imagine this very simple use case of, I just want to verify the 2 records are as they expect them there. I can then put another CSV file in my project, load this in, and then run a test to just equate the outputs of what my unit test produced and what I expect it to produce. That is possible. Another way is to just run any kind of data tests on these. For example, here with my 2 records, I expect there to be nothing outside of EMEA and North America. And also I should expect no customers named Drew. All right, I hope I've convinced you that it is possible to do unit testing and that I meet these criteria as I define what unit testing are using a number of options. And I just want to say unit testing is hard in DBT. It's very hard. It takes a lot of work to generate realistic test cases, says Michael Kaminsky on Locally Optimistic. Michelle Ark, who committed an issue to our GitHub repo, says, it feels very unnatural to write unit tests in SQL. We have to do a lot of work. And I think we need better semantics for unit testing in DBT. When would you use it? You would use it for regression testing on core and critical models that must be correct. These are very high value critical models. You put a lot of effort, a lot of time into creating these unit tests for things that must be correct. Another use case is for building new data, DBT models without source data. So imagine you're trying to make analytics without your data. You can then make mock data. And finally, reusable packages. I just want to say, because I'm running out of time, schema tests and data tests catch code errors and data errors. And so therefore, my recommendation right now, if you're starting with DBT and you're testing, schema tests and data tests are enough for you. Next, build a testing culture in your team and then have a lot of tests. And finally, if you need them, explore unit tests for high value reporting. Coming up inside of DBT version 0.20 are these exciting features. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Son. I really enjoyed the talk. Now, guys, basically, if you have any questions, just please write them down or unmute yourself. Okay, already one is coming here from Marnix. So how do blue and green databases, actually that was my question as well, how do blue and green databases relate to design, test, acceptance, and production environments? So
yeah, that's a really good question. Another one I've seen is WAP, write, audit, publish. I think we're talking about the same thing, just slightly differently, is my short answer. I'm not familiar with DTAP myself. I'll bring up the slide again for the features.
So, for example, what do you mean with the test severity thresholds?
Yeah. So imagine, okay, so a test, like I showed the data tests, right? A data test, you write a SQL statement. If there are one or more rows that are returned, then the test fails, full stop. However, I believe the test severity thresholds are saying like you can specify if there are 10 rows that return or more, then it's a failure. If it's between 1 and 9, then it's a warning.
Yeah, nice. Really nice. Gabriela is asking if you have any tips for people new to SQL.
That's a really good question. I'm going to, Gabrielle, can you reach out to me and I'll send you some resources. I'd love to share with you.
Any other questions, guys? Juan, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so Timo has a question. Will test failures contain the failing rows as well?
Will test failures contain the failing rows as well? So I think, okay, so to answer your question, this feature here, storing test failures in the database, that's coming up. This is an often requested feature of DBT. Basically, sometimes it can be hard to determine why a test has failed. And this feature, storing test failures, will then store the records that have caused the test to fail. And then you can go back and look at that and then debug your model.
Exactly. So up to this version, Timo, actually you received the count of failed rows, but yeah, what Son is mentioning is that in this new version, you're going to be able to see that as well. So that's cool. We have a question from Peter. How does DBT compare versus an ETL loading data in a data warehouse? That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, really good question. There's a lot of discussion in our data community about ETL versus ELT. And the idea is we recommend a pattern of ELT, which means to take data, raw data, load it into your data warehouse, and then perform transformations. DBT in this case is the T in that. You have your data loaded in and then you perform. And the other thing about ETL is typically the transformation is done outside of a database, maybe in a Python process, in a Spark cluster, many other options. In the ELT, the transformation is done by the data warehouse, like Snowflake or BigQuery. So you're just executing SQL right on your data warehouse. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and you don't care that much about the scaling part, which is also a big issue, I think, with regular ETL. So Bert asks also a really good question. Can you also use DBT on data warehouses, well, data lakes such as S3 or Azure Data Lake?
The answer to S3, I believe, is yes, through dbt Presto. So if you define a schema on top of your S3 files, then you can run dbt on that. There's some limitation because you can't do updates or merges. So you can't use some features in dbt, but a lot of it you can. And the other option is to bring S3 data into Snowflake, of course. And for Azure, I think, ask me offline and I'll research that for you.
Yeah. Maybe we can share also some resources on all the dbt adapters that there's built for different data warehouses, and also some data lakes. Like, for example, on S3, you can, and there's a dbt Athena adapter that runs on top of S3 as well. So that's also a possibility as well. Okay, so if there's not any other question.
I have a question which is not super relevant, but I will regret if I don't ask it. Sean, was there a case where you thought to yourself, oh, thank God I use testing? Can you share a little bit more of crazy stories like that?
Oh my gosh. I did a lot of blue-green deploys at my last company, and there were some cases where like we just had bad data that showed up in our blue environment. And if I had not run it, then the entire company would have been reporting on bad data. And that's a problem because, you know, they make decisions on bad data. I wish I could be more specific than that. I'll try to think of it for next time.
I have a question as well on the testing. The main problem for me is that testings can be easily ignored, because if you set the warning, if you set this to warning instead of error, then you just don't see them. But I want still to be tested and I want to be notified, but it's not important enough for me to not have the whole shop running, right? I want to still have it running. The solution I found is to have a different schedule shop where I do only the test. And in there, I set the severity to error. And that way I get the notification on Slack, and then I can go there like once a day and check, okay, why is one test failing? Is there a better practice, or is there maybe in the roadmap something that would make it easier to get notified?
One thing I think that test severity could help you, right? In that, like, you know, it sounds to me like you'd be okay with some errors, but not okay with other errors, like a severity level. Is that fair?
Kind of. So the thing is, we sometimes get data from different cities, right? So if I don't have a city already in my database of cities, then I'm okay with that data going through. I don't care. But I have a test on it and I want to get notified. So I can say, wait, hey, why is that we are receiving data from this city? Mm-hmm. So I want still to be on top of the error, but I want every other model still running, even though the data may not be correct because the city name is not, it's wrong or something like that.
Yeah. I know my colleague, Nick, he would do testing in stages. Like he would test his sources and then he would test his staging models and then test his dimensional models, for example. So that's another idea to throw at you. But I know what you're saying. I know the pain, because testing is tricky, right? Like it can, if it fails, everything fails. And then it's like all hands on deck and let's fix this failure. And so really like building that testing culture is really important to get everybody on board with like the right number of failures on your team, right? And then make sure that people are addressing the failures as they come up, that it's not too noisy, right? If it's too noisy, then you ignore all the test failures. Yeah, so I definitely understand your pain. I don't think I have a great answer for you though. If you have any ideas, I'd be curious.
Yeah, so what worked for me is, so when I joined, there were a lot of tests failing and nobody was paying attention at them, just what you said and described. And what worked was working a lot on fixing that. There were a lot of tests that weren't set properly. Like, for example, there was an unique test on something that was never going to be unique because of the nature of the model. And once I had clean of test and no test failing, I was able to set this severity to error, and then I would get like once a day an error, only of course on the ones that are not. And then I do have a DBT test for sources, for example, before I build the other models. So then if it fails, I definitely don't want, for a certain test, don't want data to be built on top of that. So it's a mix on what you said before as well.
I'd be curious. You should share at an upcoming meetup or something, like what you're doing.
Cool. Sure. Yeah. Still a lot to work though, but I have a lot of ideas and not so much time, I guess. But yeah, sure.
Well, I think
awesome.
It naturally opens up maybe some last words. Thank you very much for everybody attending. It was a blast. Really happy with the speeches that we heard today. Thank you so much, Marnix, and thank you so much, Sean, for sharing your work today with us. It was amazing. For all of you listening, the attendees, thank you for your attention. Feel free to stay, ask some questions. I don't know if the speakers have a little bit more time to stay. If not, stay tuned, check the group. We are planning some more meetups in the future, so let's see. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would leave the stage open if you have some more questions.